Welcome back to the second part of the Excel hands-ons. We're now in part 1, which means we want to look at the if command, as you can see here. I already mentioned it in part 0 that if command might be called differently depending on your language setting of your operating system as well as your Office suite. In my case, I have the German installment of Office as well as Windows, so for me it will be called wenn. And depending on where you're from and which language setting you have, it might not be called when or if either, but something else dependent on your language settings. So keep that in mind if you type. I will always call it if, but type when because I have to. To explain how the if command, formula, whatever works, I'd like to switch to a short presentation where we go through it. It basically follows the if this is true, then do that logic. So if this, then that. For all of you who have already dug into smart home assistants, you probably are familiar with that logic already. For all of you who aren't, it's not that hard. Stick with me. Basically what we do is we write an if condition, and this is true for Excel as well as many programming languages and other tools as well, like SQL. And then there's a test of a certain condition. We write some formula, there's something to test there. And if the test results in a true statement, so we would answer that with a yes, then we do something. And if we would answer that with no, so the result would be false, we do something else. So basically, in our case, we could, for example, write if 1 equals 1, which is naturally true. But in Excel syntax, we would write that down as if, opening brackets, 1 equals 1, semicolon, to tell Excel, okay, now the thing you have to test is ended. The thing before the semicolon is the one you have to test, so 1 equals 1. In Germany, that would be wenn 1 gleich 1. Then, whatever we have written in that statement is answered with a yes, so the condition is true. Then we go to a certain part of the formula and do whatever standing there. Then we do the following. For example, we could tell Excel then to write the text then. That would then mean that after the semicolon, we have to write then in quotation marks. The quotation marks are needed so Excel knows it should write text and not some mathematical formula, which it needs to calculate. That means on the left part of the semicolon, there's the statement which we want to test. After the semicolon, there's automatically what should be fulfilled as a task in the case that this statement is true. Logically following that, after the next semicolon, there should be standing then whatever needs to be done if this is false. Hence, if we answer that with no, in 1 equals 1 case, we would never do that, but we could write there as a condition 1 equals 2, then we would always answer it with no. Then there should be whatever we need to do in the else case. For ourselves, that could then result in the syntax if the Wahrheitstest, so the condition which we want to test, then do the following, if that's true, if not, do this. So we write again in quotation mark, write else. And that's it. That's the whole logic. And if we apply that in our use case, I would say, let's dive into the Excel again and test it out for a bit. The first thing I'd like you to do is now to unmark all of those table formattings here with the filtering. Because if we have that applied, no, it's in data, sorry. It will automatically fill out the table, which I do not want at this point because I want to show you some stuff. So we need to uncheck the filtering in data. All right. So let's start with it. For example, let's go into this cell, which is besides our calculations we did early on with the 4, the 8, and so forth. And let's just start out with what exactly we've written down before. We've written down in our PowerPoint that we wanted to make the if clause, which is for me when, 1 equals 1, then write then, else write else. And we always have to do it in brackets. All right. The thing is, you already see here that the formula just says what you need to do. First of all, I have to do the condition. Then I have to write then, or whatever should be happening if this condition is tested to be true. And then after the next semicolon, I have to write whatever should happen if the condition is tested as false. So now there should be a then. Great. We've done it, and let's say if we now make a condition which is false, then that should lead into the else case. All right, done correctly. But that's not all. We could now do something which basically is dependent on a value in a certain cell. Let's say, for example, we want to check if this value is 4 or larger than 3 or whatever. In that case, we could, for example, change that and let's check if a certain value is larger than 3. Let's say, okay, if this cell is larger than 3, or let's say larger or equal to, so at least 3, then write then, in all other cases, else. All right. 4 is larger, it should write then. But now it's dependent on that, so we can change it. So if it's 3, it's larger or equal to, all right. But if it's 2, it's smaller. So we're in the else case because now this condition is false. All right. So we now test if a value in a certain cell is equal to, is larger or equal to, and that can be numbers, but it could be text as well if we would write that in brackets again, as we have to do with text. That's cool. Another cool factor is now that we could drag that down, for example, one row down, and then we would check if this value, so in that row, if K4, so this value is larger or equal than 3. Since we drag that down, Excel automatically did go one row down. So from row 4 to 5, because that went down to row 5 as well. So in that case, we check if that value is larger or equal to 3, which it is. And by double clicking on that, we go down to all the, down till we reach the last value. So we checked it for that, then we check that for that, we check here for that, and so forth. So it's now dependent on those values, and we go down. We even can go one to the left. Then, as you can see, we went from here K to here J. So we went one column to the left. So we can drag that around, and it automatically adjusts the column letter, so the column number, so to say, and the row number as we need to. That's by default what Excel does. Sometimes we don't want that. Sometimes we want to always have, I don't know, there's a certain factor like currently $1 is roughly 0.98 euro cents, and this should always be there. And then we have like how many, so this is then dollar and this is euro, and we always want to know how much euro that is. So then we always want to say like this equals that value to the left times that, right? And now if you double click on that, oh, now it's K5 times 04 and nothing standing here. So what we needed to do here is to force in the formula that 04 is always kept steady. And we can do that by using the $sign. The $sign says not. If you drag something around, do not change the index, so from A to B to Z, or do not change the other index from 1 to 3 to 4 to 5, so the row or the column index. Instead, hold it steady. So we can force that to be logged in. If we want to force the column, we have to write a dollar for the column. If we want to force the row, we have to write a dollar sign before the row. We can only make that for the column, so we always kept O steady, but we go down the rows if we drag it down, or we can do it the other way around, always stay in row 3, but the columns are shifted, or we can force both to be steady. And now if we double click that again and we drag that down, it is kept steady. It's still O3, it's still O3, it's still O3, while for K4 we didn't change anything, so it's K5, K6, K7. So we can do that as well for the else formula. We could make it here for the K and for the 4 if we needed to. That would work as well. So before we end the if and else thing, I had made a small mistake. So we need to do the filtering again. Was my bad. So let's do that quickly. So again, Control Shift to the right, Control Shift and arrow down. We go again to format as table and format it again as this one. Then it should be already a table again. And then in data, we should make the filtering on again. All right. Since we did that, I wanted to show you something. Because now, since that is formatted as a table, if we write on the next column right besides that something in a formula like an if clause. Okay, let's say we write the if clause here and make again if 1 equals 1, then write then. In all other cases, write else. That should already be automatically filled out once I hit enter for the full table. And as you can see, it is filled out for the full table, and we already gave them a new column name, which I just changed to new column currently. So in that new column, there's always then, because 1 equals 1 all the time. But now we already had, like, we can do that in condition based. So let's, for example, say we change that and say if the region, so that table, equals, what should it be? Let's say Ludwigsburg. So since this is now text, we need to do the quotation marks again. So Ludwigsburg. All right. Now, as you can see here, it's in Tübingen case, it's false. So we go to the else case, but here it's Ludwigsburg, then here it's Ludwigsburg again. In all other cases, it's something else. So we have now for the full table, we can see where there's Ludwigsburg and where there isn't. The thing is, but if we want to say, for example, if it's Ludwigsburg, then do that. If it's Tübingen, then do the following. And if it's Reutlingen, then do something else. If we want to make the dependent, some calculations, for example, then calculate it with 0.98, then calculate it with 0.5 and whatever. And we want to make the dependent on the region. And we have more than 2 regions. And if this, then do that, and else do that is not enough. We then need if this, then do that. Else if this, then do that. Else if this, then do that. We need to make more of this else if, else if, else if things. And we can do that in Excel as well, because in the else case, we could now build in a new if case. So we say, if this is Ludwigsburg, then do this. Then we say again, else if this is Tübingen, then do this. Else if this is Reutlingen, then do this. So what we then would need to write is a new when clause, if clause, with a whole new formula, which then starts again, if this is equal to, let's say, Tübingen, then do, right, then 2, else, and we have another when clause if we want to, let's say if this is then, oops, now I hit some wrong button. If this is then equal to Reutlingen, no, Reutlingen, then write then 3. In all other cases, write else. Now it's applied. So this is then 2, as you can see here. Then this is Ludwigsburg then, and Reutlingen is then 3. So now we have that made for all of them. All right. So we can do this then, and in the other cases like Stuttgart, it's still else. So we can make it dependent. So since this is not telling us anything new, this was just for the learning effect that we can basically row different when befehls and do them within each other to make this else ifs if we need them to. We now switch to the exercise where you can apply that. So the first thing you need now to do is basically make a new column. So you can delete the old one or do a new one right beside that, which we call product category, or category if you want to say. And we want to cluster all our individual products into different groups. We want to group them if they're a drugstore item, if they're vegetable, if they're sweets, or if it's other foods. So we do know which product categories are sold the most, if you want to. Therefore, we basically need to make a new table here or override this table and call that category, and then have to check if gummy bear is from the category sweets or if gummy bear is from the category whatever. I mean, it's sweets. A small hint to do that is check now the filtering again, which we have, where you can see all the products. So we have toothpaste, tomato, soap, scent, which should be called mustard, but I didn't change it. So think about it as it should be called mustard, but it's still called scent for whatever reason, and so forth. So care cream is drugstore, chocolate is sweets, cucumbers vegetable, and so forth. You get the idea. And you do that for all of them by using if, then, else if clauses if you want to in a row. The solution will be in the next video. Please try it on yourself, but if you get stuck, you can go to the solution video, and if you're pretty sure that you have the correct solution, you do not have to check the solution video and can go directly to the next part. Have fun. See you in the next video.